Welcome to Sunday night Bible study. We're in John, the 20th chapter. And I have been talking about in the previous classes the idea that Jesus said it is finished, and we've been talking about what is finished. And there's a sense in what he has finished has begun. And then we'll start into that part of it tonight. But I put in here that it's important about what he has finished. And what he has started is that he died, he was buried, and he rose again the third day. And here's a kind of an update on those ideas that I'm going to try to cover tonight, or part of tonight, and that's chapter 20. And this has to do with Jesus coming to Jerusalem. In the three synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, there is a literary plan that was followed, and that is the ministry of Jesus was covered in Galilee. And he kept saying, I must go up to Jerusalem. And that last week when he went up to Jerusalem is what's covered in the synoptics. In John, and only in John, can you know that Jesus went up to Jerusalem between 3 and 4 years, back and forth at the feasts. And so, when I put that headline up there, Jesus comes to Jerusalem, I'm following the idea that he spent his ministry on this earth, and then he came to Jerusalem, and we had this final week. In the Sunday school lesson that I taught this morning in John, was it the 18th chapter?
Yes.
I actually dipped back into the 17th and reminded everybody that after the Lord's Supper, and we had the Lord's Supper in this church today, after the Lord's Supper and before they dismissed, Jesus, according to John, prayed a prayer that some people call the Lord's Prayer. That little short prayer about our Father who art in heaven, that is called the model prayer. The Lord's Prayer is John chapter 17, where he prayed for his disciples. And the thing that I noticed strongly is that he prayed that we would all be one. And apparently that is the hardest thing for human beings to achieve, is to get together and stay together on anything over time. And so what he started was the togetherness of the church, but he also meant for it to scatter over the face of the earth. He gave them a commission to go over the face of the earth and spread the gospel. And so it's important that we start at Jerusalem, and I'm going to show you some pictures of Jerusalem then and now. But Jesus died, he was buried, and I'm not going to quote Paul about this last line right here. Paul says, and that he rose again the third day according to the scriptures. And I'm going to point out that he arose from the grave the third day. And in John, he doesn't talk about the third day. He talks about the first day of the week. You will see that as we go. But the next thing that happened was that he appeared to the disciples. Now, most people define the disciples as the 12. And of course, we know that even the 12 could not be 12. By the time this happened, there was 11 of them. And one of them had betrayed Jesus. But when I say that he appeared to the disciples, I'm putting the women in that. And John made sure, Luke made sure, and the others really made sure that the women weren't left out of this story about who was appeared to. And there's some differences here. But the idea is that these things happened in Jerusalem, and that makes Jerusalem a very important place, both biblically and in world history. And one thing that I want to emphasize as we go and that's the word shalom. And the theologians have written about that in a lot. And there's no other word that conveys the same total idea as the word shalom. It doesn't mean just have a good trip or vaya con Dios, as they say it in Spanish. It means peace of all kinds. Peace in the world, peace in your family, peace in your life, and peace in your soul. That gets pretty deep right there. It's not just a surface thing. And I intend to bring that out as I go. But first, I'm going to show you some things about Jerusalem. Before I get into the pictures, I will read you an Old Testament story about the Philistines who stripped the bodies of those that they killed in battle, and compare that with how the body of Jesus was treated. I think this is an important piece of information. 1 Samuel 31:8, and you may remember that in some classes back I tied Samuel's birthplace and his mother's statements with the actions of Joseph of Arimathea, who was from that town, in my opinion. Arimathea is the same town where Samuel was born, in my opinion. The next day, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. So they cut off his head and stripped off his armor and sent messengers throughout the land of the Philistines to carry the good news to the house of their idols and to the people. You might as well say to the houses of their gods. They put his armor in the temple of Ashtaroth, and they fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. And so compare that with what I'm fixing to tell you about how the Jews handled the bodies of the dead with reverence. 1 Samuel 31:11, the next verse. But when the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, all the valiant men arose and went all night and took the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons from the wall of Bethshan. And they came to Jabesh and burned them there. And they took their bones and buried them under the tamarisk tree in Jabesh and fasted 7 days. There's a message in that I want you to remember when you read about Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus handling the body of Jesus. John 19:38. After these things, Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly for fear of the Jews, asked Pilate that he might take away the body of Jesus, and Pilate gave him permission. So he came and took away his body. Nicodemus also, who earlier had come to Jesus by night, came bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds in weight. So they took the body of Jesus and bound it in linen cloths with the spices, as is the burial custom of the Jews. Now in the place where he was crucified there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb in which no one had yet been laid. So because of the Jewish day of preparation, since the tomb was close at hand, they laid Jesus there. Now in previous classes, I have covered all these details. And I've talked about how the care that they had and the rules that they were under. I read you from the Mishnah in last week's class how There's a way that they could tie the body, and there's a way that they could not move it this way and that way, and they had to lay it out a certain way. And they used those spices both to wrap the body and to lay the body upon on a bed of those spices, like a bed of sand, as they did in the desert. And it talks about where in the place, I'll read it, verse 41, in the place where he was crucified, there was a garden. Well, that's an interesting statement that has been, archaeology has been looking for that for centuries. As long as there's been archaeology, they've been looking for it. And I'll talk about that. This is Gordon's Calvary. This is not the place where tradition says that it happened. This is a place that General Gordon, over 150 years ago, happened to be in Jerusalem, and he looked out across the wall of the city, across the street, and over there was this place right here that looked like a skull. And so he wrote a book that included that information, and it caught hold in England, and they couldn't, it's my understanding that they were not able to buy this territory because that is a Muslim cemetery up there on top. You may notice a radio or television aerial up there. That is not a place where you can go. It is not open to the public. And you see all those buses parked there. Well, I told you that I found that place sitting in that bus station right there on a bench waiting for a bus, and I just turned around and voila, there it was, looking me staring in the face. Well, I made a picture of it. This is not my picture. But that brings up the question, where was this tomb that Jesus was buried in? John, the 20th chapter, in the first verse, talks about that tomb. It says, early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. Now that is a very brief way of saying things that the other Gospels talked about in some detail. In the other Gospels, you'll find that there were 4 women, and Mary Magdalene went there, and John just says that Mary Magdalene, he's talking about her, he's focusing this report on Mary Magdalene, and it says that she went to the tomb, and while it was still dark, and the other Gospels point out that when they got there it was daylight. So she goes to the tomb and sees that the stone has been removed from the entrance. Now, what does remove mean? Well, some people say, well, it means that it was rolled back. And others say it was lifted plumb off the thing and laid flat on the ground. And that's why you have one report of an angel sitting on it. Well, where was the tomb? Well, right adjacent to Gordon's Calvary, there's a garden. And in that garden is a tomb. And that's a picture of the tomb. And you can see that, that it was a garden. It still is. And I could show you various pictures that prove it was a garden. For one thing, what a garden was probably a place that had a wine press where they could press the olives and the grapes and gather the juice and have olive oil and make wine out of the grape juice. And so there was a press, and there's one near this tomb in that garden. I can show you a picture of it. I'm not going to do it for the press of time. But there you are. That is a tomb that's there. And the Church of England bought that place in response to General Gordon's writings. And they still own it today, and you can go there. And if you want to be in on a real worship service, try that one. This is a picture of Jerusalem that was that I recognized from the time that I was there, and that's 40 years ago. And I'll show you what I mean to emphasize about this picture. You see those two domes right there? That's the Temple Mount. That's the Mosque of Omar, or the Dome of the Rock. And that little dome there is the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And that wall that you see right across there is the Temple Mount. And right over here you see to my right there in that picture, that's the Mount of Olives. This tower up there is supposed to represent the place where Jesus ascended into heaven from the Mount of Olives. I doubt very seriously that anybody knows the exact place, but we do know it's the Mount of Olives, so that's close enough. I'm emphasizing that all of this took place in Jerusalem, and that makes Jerusalem important to everybody. Now, do you see the barrenness of that hill there? Just remember that. I'm fixing to show you a picture, a modern picture that's totally different. But in this picture, there is a graveyard. It's a Jewish graveyard. And it's down here, right in here where my cursor is. And it's so small that I can't even see it in this picture. But I'm going to show you the changes that have been made about that. So just remember this picture. And when we ask the question, where was Jesus buried? Where was he crucified? In the 4th century, Constantine sent his mother, Helena, to Jerusalem to find out just exactly where Jesus was crucified and where he was buried and where the shrines are that exist today. And so in the 4th century, they had to make up their mind about some things, and so I'm going to show you. Can you see something right up through there where my cursor is? Can you all tell that well enough? There's something silver looking up there. Well, that's the dome of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, they call it. It's got other names. It's in Latin and Greek and every other kind of language, but we call it the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And this is where Helena and her Roman people, along with the Bishop of Caesarea, decided that that's the place. And so there's a church there today, and I'm going to show you pictures of that. And the other place, you see where the cursor is now? You see those trees up there in the distance? That's where the garden tomb is, in those trees. And so I've pointed out to you that the graveyard of the Jews is down in here, outside the temple wall. There's the temple. And over here is the place the tradition says that Jesus was crucified and buried. And up there is where General Gordon said it was. And so I'm going to have a look at both of them if y'all don't mind. Now this is a more modern picture. This was made less than 10 years ago, when the Jewish people took over Jerusalem in the 1967 war. That changed everything. And they took control of just about all that territory, but they've never been given control of the Temple Mount. I got a phone call today from somebody that wanted to know if I thought that they were rebuilding the temple on the Temple Mount. Well, I'll guarantee you, if they start, there will be 2 billion Muslims that will show up down there with guns in their hands and say, you're not going to do this. That temple right there is as sacred to the Muslims as it is to the Jews. And it's sacred to us in a sense. If you can say that a place is sacred, well, Jesus made it sacred by setting his foot there. That doesn't mean that we need to go there to worship God. That's not why you go there. Oh, I guarantee you that you can have a unique experience by going there. I found that out. But there is the temple. And right in there, you see where the cursor is? That's where the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is. Right here at the end of the Temple Mount is where Fortress Antonia was. You see what are y'all able to see my cursor? Mm-hmm. Let me see. I didn't magnify that, did I? All right, there's the Temple Mount. And Fortress Antonia was that area right there. And some say Jesus was tried there, and others say he was tried over here in that area right there where Herod's palace was. Wherever it was, doesn't really matter. We care, but we don't care. It's and that Church of the Holy Sepulchre is a dome that's over in there, and I'm not sure I can even find it right now, but I know that it's right in here where my cursor is. And then where the garden tomb is, you see this wall right here? That's the Jerusalem wall and the temple wall. And that wall goes right up there and turns and goes across. And General Gordon was about right there where my cursor is when he looked across the road and saw that Gordon's cavalry. And you see those trees right there? That is where the garden tomb is. So take your choice. Now, do you see the Mount of Olives here? Do you see that there's something right there on the end that was barren in that other picture? Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to show you what that is. But first, let's see. I'm going to go back here and show you something. In this picture also is the Old Testament. You see that territory out there? That's the Old Testament history of the Jews out there. That's the importance of Jerusalem from one standpoint. You ever heard of Gibeon of Saul? Well, that's just right in here. How about Beth Horon? Well, that's the route up the mountains. See that gully, you might call it, or that is a stream that goes all the way to the Mediterranean Sea, and those valleys went all the way to the Mediterranean from Jerusalem, and there's more than one of them. And Beth Horon is the road down there to Caesarea, and you could take that road and be on high ground all the way and not wander through those canyons. And that's the way the armies always came up that hill. Caesarea is out there, right down where my cursor is. Tel Aviv is right down there. And when you stand at Arimathea, you're on the lower part of those mountains and hills. And you can look right down there to the water and see Tel Aviv in the distance. That's where Arimathea is. Well, that's right there in the distance. And Emmaus is going to pop up in John later, and I won't get to it tonight. But on the trip to Emmaus, in that conversation, there is an explanation of what's going on from Jesus to clarify to those that didn't understand. And so the road to Emmaus and the conversation that took place is an important part. And I put that word, shalom, you remember that I put it on that cover? That word pops up, and I'm going to show you that in due time. But first I'm going to show you all this. Here's the road to Emmaus where I went, and this is Gibeon of Saul. And I was looking around to see what I could see, and these two characters ran out there, and they saw that I was an American, and they insisted that I come in their house, and they gave me this little old cup of coffee that was the strongest stuff I ever touched in my life. You could spread it on bread. It was better than Louisiana coffee as far as, I mean, you could float a nail in it. But anyway, their message was that they wanted to come to America. Everybody I met over there wants to come to America. And so I had a missionary son with me that took this picture. And lo and behold, when I get to looking at this picture, he blocked out something that I wanted in the picture. You see that high ground back there in that crack right there?
Yeah.
See, there's some buildings up there. That's Nabi Samuel. That's supposed to be the tomb of Samuel up there. It's a church. Anyway, I tried to get it all. You can't get it all. You can't have your cake and eat it too, can you? All right, here's another picture that I think Dr. Brown took this picture of our class. He was one of our instructors. That's my cursor's on Dr. Ward right there, who's really the professor of this class. And here we are on the Mount of Olives, and you can see the graveyard. I think I was told that's a Muslim graveyard there. Right under the temple wall. Everybody seems to have wanted to be buried near the temple wall. The Muslims say that this is that El-Aqsa Mosque. You see it where my cursor is? That is where Muhammad mounted his winged horse and rode off to heaven, and that's where he's expected to come back. You see that walled up gate right down there? That's the Golden Gate, and they've walled it up because the Jews say when the Messiah comes back, he's going to walk through that gate. And so they walled it up to keep him out. You reckon it'll work?
No.
Well, anyway, you can see this is the Mount of Olives, and there's the graveyards, and there's the wall, and there's the Dome of the Rock. Now, that Dome of the Rock is sacred to both the Muslims and the Jews because that's supposed to be where Abraham came to sacrifice his son. The Jews say it was Isaac. The Muslims say it was the other son. The Jews lied. Only World War III or the coming of the Lord will solve that argument. I hope it's not World War III. If you want to know why they're not rebuilding the temple on that mount, it's because they don't want to start World War III. And I guarantee you that if I was in Jerusalem and said those words, they'd know what I was talking about. They all are aware. Now, this is an 1858 map of Jerusalem and the Mount of Olives in the graveyard. This was considered the most accurate map at the time it had ever been drawn. I think it was surveyed. And I don't really know who did this, but you see where my cursor is there? That's the Jewish graveyard. Right there. Those others I showed you in the picture. This is the temple. You see where the cursor is there? That's the corner of the temple. That right there is supposed to be the corner of the temple where the devil took Jesus to tempt him to jump off. That's supposed to be it. And those graves I showed you in the picture were right there. We were standing right up here when that picture that I just showed you. And those graves are down here, and there's 40 or 50 of them. That's the way it was back in 1858, okay? That's the way it is today. Or at least that's the way it was about 10 years ago. 10 years ago, there were between 70 and 150,000 graves right there. They don't really know how many. Y'all want to try to count that? I would call that some of the most expensive real estate in the world. How much does it cost to be buried in a graveyard here in Little Rock? Well, just imagine how much it costs to be buried in that graveyard. I mean, how much real estate have they got for sale? I mean, how much did they pay for that? All right, so there's the picture. Here is a picture of the Church of All Nations down in the Garden of Gethsemane. And there's a graveyard in there. I'm going to show you a picture of it. But the Church of All Nations, remember, is built supposedly where the Garden of Gethsemane was, where Jesus came to pray before they came to arrest him. And that right back there, you see that dome on that church. Well, I did magnify it, didn't I? That is the so-called Russian church. That's the church of Mary Magdalene, put there by the Empress of Russia, who is buried there. And I guarantee you that all of that cost somebody lots of money. Only the Empress of Russia had enough money to put a church right there. And that's the Mount of Olives, of course. And you see the starting of the graveyards right there. Well, I'm emphasizing the importance of the burying in Jerusalem. Y'all get what I'm trying to come to here? It's a big deal. There is a Christian graveyard in the so-called, what they think is the Garden of Gethsemane. There's there's the olive trees, and there's the graves. And I just can't imagine what it would cost to get buried in that one. As a matter of fact, I don't imagine you can get buried in that one unless you spend your life working there or something. Anyway, you can know that it's an expensive proposition. And I'm emphasizing that it was an expensive proposition, the burial that Jesus got. It never was cheap. And it's as expensive now as it was then, maybe more so. Now here is an old-time method of burial of the Jews. Those are what they call ossuaries. And that's got the ashes of people in there. And I showed you from the Old Testament that they burned people's bones, and then they would put them in these ossuaries and so forth. This particular ossuary is at a place that's called Dominus Flavi. Dominus Flavi. And that is a Latin version of Jesus wept. And so they've taken a spot where they say that Jesus paused and wept over Jerusalem. And I think they've even got a teardrop that hit a rock and burned a hole in it, and so forth, at this place. And so these are the ossuaries that are in a cave under that thing. This is the so-called tomb of Lazarus. And you can see that they'd stoop down and enter in there. And there's a rock in there that you can roll away, and I'll show you a picture kind of on that design. I'm showing you different kinds of designs that they had. Now, there is the Church of All Nations, and they have got, I think that's the one that's got the 10 Commandments in probably 90 languages posted on the wall. And they've also got the 12 apostles around the building, and the Apostle Paul is shown as one of them. And then there is the Russian church with the what we call the onion-shaped dome. But I understand that that's real gold on those domes. And you can imagine what a problem security is in Jerusalem with whoever the cops are. And I could get into that about that church. I'll get into it a little bit when we come to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. All right, but this is a picture taken from up on the north end, above really from the area where Gordon's Calvary is. And you can see the Mount of Olives over there, and see those new graveyards there on the right? See the end down there and all that? Tens of thousands of graves, and there's those churches, and there's the Garden of Gethsemane, and look at here. There's more of them over here on this side too. So the Temple Mount is surrounded as close as they can make it, and the graves are both Muslims and Jews, and some Christians, as I've showed you. And here is a funeral in a Jewish cemetery. And I'll show you a couple of phenomena. Notice that all of the guys, are those all preachers or who are they? Well, those are those Hasidics, the ones with the, you see the curls on the hanging down the side. They don't cut those off. They wear these hats. All of them wear the same hat, and all of them wear the black. And the men do the funeral. But now, what's this right here? That looks like a woman to me. And she's got some kind of a shopping bag. Now, I don't know I haven't studied their methods, but that's an interesting little picture right there.
Are women not allowed to go to funerals?
Well, there's none in that picture with those guys except out there, right there. And I take it that the funeral's over is why she's coming.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Don't think that I gave you a scholarly answer on that. All right, here we are back at the Mount of Olives. And who knows how much money and how many people's bones are wrapped up in that picture right there. It's just almost beyond belief. And there's a picture of them up close. Y'all asked me whether they dug a hole and buried them or put them in boxes or what. Jesus talked about the Pharisees being like dead men's bones are in a whitewashed thing. Well, there you got the whitewashed, the real McCoy, right? But that's what those tens of thousands of them are right there on the Mount of Olives. There they are. It snows in Jerusalem, and that picture was taken in the snow, but that gives you an idea. And some of them are bigger than others. Some of them, their families have got more money or more honor or something. So we do that too, do we not? My grandfather's got a tombstone that's buried in the ground, sort of, just a little plate. And I've got some other relatives that've got a big old hunk of marble that you couldn't move with a crane. And so here's more of the same. Here is a picture, and this comes from the garden tomb. And I think I took this picture. I got my pictures mixed up, and I'm fairly sure that I took this picture. And I only took one, and I regret that. But I guarantee you that there's few worship services available that'll compete with that. That is a Anglican priest up there, or father, or whatever they call them, and that's the Church of England. And they had due respect for the situation and the place. I respect them for that. Now, here is the other place. You see the two domes in the center of the picture. Well, since the Emperor of Rome, Constantine, sent his mother there to identify that place, there have been wars and rumors of wars ever since. And I don't know how many times Jerusalem has changed hands. And Christianity has tried to maintain ownership of that building the whole time. And you can know that some deals had to be made and some compromises had to be made. And that building's been subject to earthquakes. It's been subject to It had more than one fire that burned it out inside. And it's been torn down a time or two. In about the 2nd century, one of the Roman emperors decided that he was going to do away with any Christian shrine to Jesus and to erect the shrine to his God. So they dug the ground up right there where that church is, before it was ever there. They dug that ground up and put a temple to one of their gods there, and that had to be torn down to build this church. And there's a long story about that, and I won't try to get in it, but I'm just going to tell you that that's an ancient church, and it has this unbelievable tear down, build up, tear down, conquer, change hands, fight, and what all, and what we got is what we got. And it's not the best representation of the place of the true cross that the world can think of, but that's what we got, and that's all we can get in history without causing another war. And there's people that'll fight one over that place right there and have in the past. And this is a kind of a drawing to tell you what that is. Do you see the yellow there? Of course you can see it, but take note of the yellow. They say that that is what that place looked like before they put the church there and before the excavations were done to put first the heathen temple there, the temple to the, I forget which god it was, and then they came along and tore that out and built this, and so all of that material there was taken out. And you see that where my cursor is? That shows a cave. Well, that's supposed to be the tomb that Joseph of Arimathea dug. Well, you can see that the roof of it's gone. There's no cave there. And there's this device right there. Well, that's a structure that's been there for several hundred years over the place that they say was the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. And over here on this side, you see it says Golgotha's rock. Well, there's a rock sticking up there, and they've dug away the material. You see the yellow is gone. And so they've got a floor in that church that commemorates these places, and I'm going to show you that. But it is compared to the garden tomb in that Calvary over there. It's hard to picture the reality. The picture of reality is up there at the garden tomb. This right here, the archaeologists say that this is really the place. And I've know Baptist scholars that go right along with it and say, yeah, that's the place. It just doesn't look like it. Well, it sure doesn't. Here is an artwork in there. And this shows you that some of what's happened over time. You turn the artist loose and tell them to paint a picture of a certain thing, and their imagination will enable them to come up with something. Now, this is supposed to be the anointing of Jesus. And so you see all these women standing right there, almost looking over the men's shoulders to see how that's done. And I think I showed you how the Hasidics did it, and they weren't quite that close. Does that make sense? And so the artist didn't know all that. And then you see these halos. Well, I'm not sure exactly who those halos are about, but I wonder if that's supposed to be St. Peter there, and that's supposed to be John over there, and this is supposed to be Mary down here that are anointing Jesus. I don't know. But anyway, there's an awful lot. You know, when Jesus prayed, and after in that Sunday school lesson I mentioned this morning about 17th chapter of John, he prayed that we would be as one. Well, I'll guarantee you we're not as one on how this was done. And that artwork's different than how I think it was done anyway. And so here is the burying. And so you've got all these haloed people, these saints, carrying the body wrapped in a shroud, and his head is not wrapped up. His head is showing. Well, according to the custom, you know, I read y'all out of the mission last week about how there was a way to wrap the head, and you weren't supposed to mess with the jaw unless there was a danger of it falling more open than it already was, and you tie the jaw up and all of that. This, I think, well, that does show that there's a halo around Jesus' head too, doesn't it? All right, so there's a halo over there too. So there's all kind of halos in this art. And the thing about it is that this is the place where the whole world is shown by 7 or 8 different, the heads and the organization of some of the big religions in the world. This is what people are shown. Here is the way that the stone of anointing is done. And this picture is interesting to me. There's a lot of stuff that interests me that just bores other people to death. But I'll call attention to a thing or two. That slab right there is a slab that they have made to cover the stone of anointing. I don't think anybody believes that slab right there was present where they anointed Jesus Christ's body. But anyway, you see that woman there, she is totally absorbed with it. She's either touching it or kissing it. I don't know which. And she is worshiping there as if that's the real thing. Well, I'm not against it. I worship myself. But I guarantee you I didn't kiss any rocks. But here is a woman that is touching that. And people that go to Jerusalem on these pilgrimages as they want to take something home. And I touch that. And here are some other people that are standing off back. I'm not going to touch that thing. I don't want to get struck by lightning. You know, this business about being afraid of angels, well, there's some people that are afraid of that. And I'm really amused by this picture right up here. Y'all see that? They're not even down there on the floor with it. Well, anyway, I can make fun of a lot of stuff. And I don't mean to make fun of that. I just find it interesting, the different responses that people have to these things. And so there is the anointing stone and the lamps that hung above it. And I don't know what it would cost you to have your lamp hung there. I mean, can you imagine what it would cost? I don't know. And I don't know how long somebody's lamp stays there before they put somebody else's. All right, here is a service at the place of crucifixion. Now, this is not the anointing stone. This is supposed to be the actual tomb. And they're standing outside. Do you see they've got a painting there? That's the painting, and this is, I don't know who that is, but Jesus is not covered up there. They laid him out, and the truth of the matter is that when they got him, he was naked as a jaybird. I mean, we know that. And you can't really hide it. That's part of the scandal that Jesus suffered, is the way that crucifixion is so cruel and so heartless and so forth. And notice here the racial makeup of all these people. I mean, there's 7 churches that own this property in one. I mean, this church owns this part of it, and this church owns this part of it. Somebody else has got something else, and they alternate services, and that's, by the way, is refereed by whoever controls Jerusalem, and it used to be the Muslims, and the Caliph refereed these fights between these churches pushed and shoved over the use of these places. And I'll get into that. But now the Jews control it. And this contraption that they've got over that's supposed to be the burial chamber, the building inspector in Jerusalem declared it to be unsafe, and so they had to stop and rebuild the thing. And it had been there since the Middle Ages, and so it was unsafe. Well, anyway, all of that is part of the story of this thing. I didn't mean to divert what we're talking about here into all this, but I'm showing you the theology that can grow out of the stories that we're in, and I'm really emphasizing the importance of getting it right. I don't think that there's any hope of Christianity being as one until we get this right. There's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the altar at Golgotha's Rock. And what in the world it would take for me to be represented there, I can't imagine. But I'm not the kind of a guy that was well impressed with all of that. I mean, there's people, they would give their right arm to die right there and be buried right there. There's another view of and by the way, you see in those glass cases, you can go and you can actually see what they say is Golgotha's actual rock. Well, all I'm going to tell you is about that Golgotha is that it was never told to us that it was a hill. It was never told it was anything. It was just the place of the skull. And I know of some theologians that claim that the only reason it was called the place of the skull is because they left people hanging on those crosses where it was, and the skulls were laying around on the ground, so it was called the place of the skull, and it hadn't got a thing in the world to do with the hill. Well, you know, we sing about the hill of Calvary and so forth. Well, be careful what you get into when you worship. I think we need to be careful how we portray things and how we say things and what we do and the demonstrations that we put on and the rituals that we will participate in. These rituals here, I saw, and I was impressed with one or two, not because of the ritual, but because of the dedication of the people that I saw that had spent their lives doing that. That impressed me. That is their version of taking up their cross and following Him. This is I guess it's the edicule. And this is the structure over the tomb. And this is the structure that was built early on, and then it was out of wood and fire burned it down, and so they did it with iron girders, and then they rusted up and fire burned that, and finally the Jewish building inspectors came along and said, we're going to do something about that, so they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars building that, and that's the new version. And that's supposed to be the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. There it is. It's a big thing. And who they'll let go in there, I can't imagine. This is a picture that was taken in the 1870s of people going in there in that church. That's an ancient thing. I told you the stonework's been there for these hundreds and hundreds of years. Nobody knows exactly just how old some of that is, because some of it was torn down during this earthquake and rebuilt, and some of it was torn down in the war, and on this goes. But anyway, take a look at these people. I notice that there's nobody in that picture that's wearing a suit and tie. And in the 1870s, there was no such thing as a jet plane where you could just get on a jet plane and fly over it there and make yourself a trip and go. These people had to hoof it to get there. I see that guy right there. That's probably the Eastern Orthodox Church, either that or the Coptics from Egypt, one of the two. And some of these folks, see that fellow right there with that turban? I'd be afraid to say just exactly who he is. His turban is different from that one up there. All right, here is a modern procession. This is the Greek Orthodox. And I tried to do a little investigation and find out just exactly what these uniforms represent. And I frankly ran out of time before this class. And so I can't tell you why those guys are wearing fezzes unless it has to do with the fact that the Sultan is the one that made the rules that they operate under today. Y'all ever heard of that law? The name of it is the status quo. Oh, y'all didn't know that was a law, did you? Well, if you've ever heard of the status quo, there's only really one law that's called that, and that governs the use of that building. And it's 200 or 300 years old. The Sultan put out a decree that from now on, this is the way you're going to do it. And so everybody that's there has to go by that decree. And so he decreed how that's lined up. And I really don't know whether those guys in front are Christians or whether they're Muslims or who they are. But they're wearing fezzes. And that may go back to that thing. And I noticed that they've got these staffs, and these other guys have got the palm. And so this is a celebration of Palm Sunday. And you see that fella back there? Let's see. Do you see how he's got a kind of a caped head bonnet there? That makes him at least a priest. And for all I know, he's the Metropolitan. That's what they call their Pope, is the Metropolitan. The Metropolitan really means the bishop of the city. And the Greek Orthodox was the bishop of the city of Constantinople. The Pope of Rome was the bishop of the city of Rome, is how that started. So here's the people from the Eastern Roman Empire, the Eastern Orthodox. Orthodox means orthodoxos, the straight word. They say that we have got the straight word from the disciples from the East. All the scriptures were written in Greek, and we speak Greek, and on this goes. So there's the argument. And so they say that they are the ones who represent Jesus in this place. So here comes their procession. Any questions about that one? And so here is the Roman Catholic procession. And you see anything curious about that one? I mean, there's the fezzes. And in this one, they've got the uniforms on and the weapons. And so, I don't know what that, I'm going to investigate, and if I have time, I'll find out this week and tell you next week who these people are. But you can know that those are the monks, and the Franciscans are in charge of the facilities at this place in the name of the Roman Catholic Church. If you see it, if you hear the writings about it, they'll call it the RCC. Well, those are Franciscan monks who have dedicated their lives to living in the monastery. They do not live in houses. They live here in this church, because it's a monastery also. And then these fellows in the red back there, are those cardinals? I reckon they are. And so this is a procession, and it's not Palm Sunday or they'd have the palms. It's probably of the cross itself. You see the form of the cross they've got right there that the monk is carrying. And here's something I respect. This is the Franciscan monks who have dedicated their lives in the monastery. And this is station 1 of the Via Dolorosa. And this station 1 really means where Jesus was condemned by Pilate and where they made him pick up his cross and go. That's station 1. And so they're having a service. And take a look here. That brother is reading the scripture. And this brother is putting something over his head. And I don't really know what that represents. But notice that this is prayer and reverence. I respect that every time. I'm not hung up on the ritual, but I'm hung up on taking your cross. That means something. Here is a Christian Palm Sunday procession. And I notice that this is not a funeral procession. I kind of think that they're having a good time. Can you see that they're happy? Palm Sunday was a time of happiness. Jesus had not been crucified, and they didn't know he was going to be crucified. Only Jesus knew it. Nobody else knew it. I say that one other person knew it, and that's the one that anointed him for his burial, and her name was Mary, you remember? To me, there's only one person that understood that that led to the cross, and that was not a disciple. That was somebody by the name of Mary. What I just said bothers a lot of people for me to say it. I said it, and I'll say it again if you ask me. So this is the church itself. And over time, and the property has changed hands so many times that they could not control the property around this church, and so it's not in a garden, it's not in a nice place. It's down there crowded around all these old buildings, and you can hardly maneuver. But anyway, you see the problem. There's another view of it. And here's the two domes. One of them is a dome over the what they call the Rock of Calvary, and the other one is the dome over the tomb of Jesus. And I'm going to call your attention to something that's in this picture. I got to go back. You see a ladder right there? That's probably the most famous ladder in the world. And I'm not joking. And I'll tell you why in a minute. Have I used up my time? I'll tell you next week.
You're not going to tell us the rest of the story? You're going to tell us next week, make us come back.
Well, I'll go ahead and tell you. I mean, they can turn the camera off anytime they want to. Let me go forward here a little bit. That's other pictures of it, and you can see that ladder up there. Mm-hmm. There it is. Now that ladder cannot be moved because of the status quo. The Sultan said that you will not change anything. And the word anything includes that ladder. And that ladder was up there, and it's been there since 1557. Now, I don't think that's the same ladder. Let me show you. Does that look like that? Does that ladder look like it's been out in the rain that long? Well, somebody has cheated us a little bit and put up some new wood, but they didn't take the ladder down, is the point. It cannot be moved.
Why is that ladder there?
The Sultan said, you cannot change anything from this day forward. And that ladder was there, so they can't move it. All right, so here, I've got it down here about the status quo. The decree of the Sultan, no authority can be changed. All these churches that are in there, they've got their little place, and they can operate in their area, and they can only get in the other guy's area with permission. And I will tell you that in history, there have been some big fist fights over the places. That's why the Sultan made this rule. No possessions can be changed. No constructions can be changed. Nothing can be changed. And this agreement governs all Christian shrines, both in Jerusalem and in Bethlehem and some other places. And the Franciscans are the ones that represent the Roman Catholic Church. And there's 4 stations of the Via Dolorosa inside the church. And I think there's either 9 or 10 stations. I didn't trouble myself to go through the stations. But here is a list of the churches. You got the Roman Catholic Church, the Greek Orthodox, the Armenian Apostolic, the Coptic. Actually, the 3 main churches, I think, are the Roman Catholic, the Greek Orthodox, and the Coptics. And the rest of them got a smaller presence. But there's the Syriac, which started in Syria, and then the Ethiopian Orthodox. You know, there are Ethiopian Jews and there are Ethiopian Christians, and a lot of Ethiopian Christians. And their church has got a stake in this.
Who's the Sultan, and why does he have that kind of power?
The Muslims captured Jerusalem starting with after the Crusaders. Salah ad-Din, or Saladin, captured Jerusalem in the 10th century or about the 11th. And the Muslims have really owned it, more or less, since then, until General Allenby walked in 1917, and the British had it, and then the British turned it over to the Jews on the Balfour Declaration, and that's when the Jews took over the Holy Land. And then in the 1967 war, the Jews took over all of Jerusalem, and for the first time in over 1,000 years, they owned the property, and they could have wiped out Christianity in that church. But the rule of the Sultan still stands.
Is the Sultan the head man of...
He's the head man of the Muslims in Jerusalem. Yeah. He's the governor. So I answered the question about the ladder, right?
Well, why they put that ladder there? Where were they going when they climbed that ladder?
They're washing windows.
I don't know.
I will.
Nobody knows.
Yes, somebody knows, and I will speculate.
The materialist said why it was there, and he said it's not going to be moved.
There was somebody. Now, y'all hear me now. You asked me a question, so I'm going to give you an answer. There's one, I told you there's 7 churches own this thing and divided up, right? And so one church owned the hall that had the door in that room, and another church owned the room. And so they got in the room with that ladder. Now, y'all get that?
Yeah.
And when the Sultan said, I've had enough of this, y'all are going to do it this way from now on. And so that ladder has stood there ever since. And so we'll take it up there, Lord willing, next week. Let us pray. Our Father, we thank you for the scriptures and what they mean to us, in that we can learn about what Jesus has done for us because you sent him, and in obedience to your command. Help us to understand what we owe you back. Help us to learn how to take up our cross and help us to learn to be at one and not be divided and fighting each other as we have this example here. We ask a blessing upon your people wherever they are this day. For it's in Christ's name we ask it. Amen.
In order to get big in that place, who did they have to get permission from?
I'm going to have to put a sign